Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I am in the Zurich temple with Devasri Radhika Devi Dasi, a disciple of His Holiness Bhakticharu Swami. She is from Kolkata, India, and I would like to request her to introduce herself.
Hare Krishna. It is a pleasure to meet everybody through I'll play this voice notes. As Prabhuji just mentioned, my name is Devasri Radhika Devi Dasi. I am born and brought up in Calcutta, India. My family, though, hails from Varanasi, which is in north of India, and it is also known as the abode of the Ganges. From childhood, I had the great fortune of being gifted with Krishna consciousness. So, since childhood, I had this great opportunity to be in touch with the ISKCON movement, and I grew up. I still remember I started with the Bhagavad Gita classes for children, and it was a very ecstatic time because we would just learn the Bhagavad Gita and just draw and color Krishna paintings. And I think that is one of the most beautiful times of my life. That is how I grew up in Krishna consciousness, and in the early 2000s, when I was still quite little, I met His Holiness Bhakticharu Swami Guru Maharaj, my spiritual master, and he was very kind and reciprocative. And I still remember in the first meeting itself, he called all the children, which were just 4 of us, right in the front, and he just spoke to us. And I still remember the first conversation I had with him was with a question. So he always encouraged me a lot to ask questions. And then later growing up, I was quite engaged in learning more and more and asking more and more questions. After I finished high school, I moved on to study law. So I got into one of the best national law schools in India. It's the second best in the nation. It's called National University of Juridical Sciences. And I spent 5 years there, where I also got different kinds of opportunities to work under Supreme Court lawyers, and I also worked under the Supreme Court judge as his judicial clerk, where I worked on proofreading judgments and case laws. After that, I also had a brief legal career where I worked as a legal manager with a real estate company. That was quite a good experience, but I always thought something was missing, and I always had some level of dissatisfaction. I was a lawyer and I was practicing, but I also was called to the bar. I gave the All India bar examination, and I passed that too. And as my father is also a lawyer, so sometimes I would go to court and argue cases. But there was always something missing, because I somewhere felt that a part of me is not intellectually engaged. I felt very half just practicing law. And in 2017, a family friend of mine, Krishna Abhishek Prabhu, he is teaching in Michigan. He's also a devotee. He's a disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. He got in touch with me because he knew me since I was a kid, and he just wanted to catch up with me. And then that's when he asked me about what I'm doing, and I said, well, finished law school and I'm working, but I just feel very dissatisfied. And at that point in time, he suggested, have you ever considered academics, but through a Krishna conscious perspective? I said, that's interesting. And then he told me about what are the opportunities that I could avail. So I started my own research, and I started reading more and more on what I could do. And the more I read, the more I felt motivated, in the sense that I felt ready that I could transition from law to religion and law in the academic perspective. And I knew that this transition wouldn't be easy, although I had the Shastric knowledge in the sense that I grew up reading scriptures, but it is very different to be much more aware about the technicalities that the scriptures offer, and if you want to use it in an academic perspective. So I started reading different authors also, like I read Gavin Flood, Olive L. Patrick, also a lot of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which was very inspiring for me. Different articles by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and I also read some works by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. And I think I read a lot of his quotes, and they were a driving force why my inclination towards academics grew all the more. And then in 2018, I got in touch with Shaunak Rishi Prabhu at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, and I was considering applying to Oxford, and he said how I'm quite welcome. But at the same time, I also applied to the University of Heidelberg and at the South Asia Institute, and which is supposed to be one of the best in Germany. And I got through, and this was before I even started with my Oxford application. So I got something confirmed in my hand. So I thought it might be wise to just go with it. And also I get to learn a new language. It was a little intimidating moving to a country where I do not know the language. But then in 2018, March, I moved to Germany. And just to go back to a little bit of my spiritual life, in 2015, 1st of January, in Ujjain, I was blessed and was initiated by my spiritual master. And then briefly from 2015 to 17, I rendered some secretarial services, although I wasn't traveling. But it was quite an ecstatic time to be able to directly serve your spiritual master and also see, I mean, he's a manifestation of Prabhupada's mercy, and also seeing a reflection of Prabhupada's teachings in all his disciples. I think that was a very great chance for me, and it motivated me a lot in Krishna consciousness. And here in 2018, I am in Germany, and I started studying. It was quite nice, also very new, so I was very interested. I started studying different philosophers, which I perhaps wouldn't have done. The traditional philosophy and also the contemporary. I started studying a lot on culture, temple culture, and also I studied a bit on Islam and Buddhism, because I thought it's important to also go out of my comfort zone. I wouldn't say I'm quite good at that knowledge, but yes, definitely I started reading. And this I saw because before I moved to Heidelberg in 2017, I also presented my project at a Vaishnava in Theory and Practice conference in Jadavpur University, and we had a lot of our devotee scholars like His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj, Radhika Raman Prabhu, Mans Bro, I do not remember his initiated name, but he's also a devotee scholar, and such devotee scholars. And I also met Pranava Prabhu there, Ferdinando Sardella, and it was quite inspiring for me to see that, wow, there are devotees who are doing so well. And Radhika Raman Prabhu is also heading the chair at Utah. So I was like, wow, that is so great, because devotees can be in these places and they can be change makers and lead the change. So it was very important for me to see that. And then coming back to Heidelberg, my life in Heidelberg. So since 2018 and now it's 2020. It's been about 2.5 years that I'm at the university, and I am about to complete my studies now in September. That's when I submit my thesis. And my thesis I'm working, it's quite a transcultural project. Heidelberg has a school of excellence in transcultural studies, and this was an idea which took its seed in Heidelberg. So that is like the starting point of transcultural studies. And to briefly explain, transcultural studies is basically how you cannot study, for example, history without the other subjects. So you cannot have a very narrowed approach to history, or for any subject for that matter. You study it with the linkages and interlinkages, and that's a very important aspect. And that is precisely where my work comes in, where I link law with religion, philosophy, and the different aspects. So I think that's pretty much a very, very brief introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does your Krishna conscious background support your academic goals?
That's a very nice question. I think my Krishna conscious background helped me in the sense that from the first day onwards, when I was in class, I stood out. because I knew so many things, and my fellow classmates were like, wait, how do you know that? And at that point in time, I just felt so grateful to Srila Prabhupada for writing like this, and also for the fact that we have a movement where we can learn like this. And I was instantly grateful to my local temple and the teachers, or my Shiksha Gurus, because without them perhaps I could have never... of course, I think the seed of sincerity is very important. So just because they attracted me so much, I also felt sincere enough to learn. So I saw from day one there was a difference, because there were a lot of things I just knew. I never learned Sanskrit in school, but just because I grew up learning the Bhagavad Gita, there were so many Sanskrit words I just knew the meaning of. Sandhi rules, etc., still very difficult for me. But that was the thing that I always stood out, and I could give references from different scriptures. And everyone was, let's say, mind blown how someone who's a lawyer knew all of this, and they thought I'm very well read. But then I told some of them my secret, that I just read Srila Prabhupada's books, and I just like to hear lectures, and that's how I learned. So I think without my Krishna conscious background, I don't think I would stand out so much, because I see that I see how my peers see me as intellectually very capable, and so much so that in 2019 they elected me as the president of the student body. So it was through elections and everything. So instantly they just grew fondness, and I realized how when we are between the devotee community, we do not know how we stand out, or the qualities that we are given or gifted just being a devotee. Like they say, side effects of devotion, just being kind, compassionate, or even friendly, and being nice. So for devotees, it's just so normal being nice. But for the outside world, it's so attractive that you're nice. It's something that stands out. So I would say, without my Krishna conscious background, I don't think I am where I am because of my Krishna conscious background.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And what prompted you to make this transition from law to the study of religion and law?
Yeah, that's one question I get asked about a lot. Because generally, lawyers don't switch their careers because it's not financially very lucrative. But for me, I think I wanted some taste in what I do. And even now when I talk to some of my very good friends from law school, yeah, it's just sad, but then it's very depressed. They are very depressed, and because somewhere the emotional aspect, because whatever we do has some sort of effect on us, because we engage and spend so much time with it, we associate with it. So for my friends, it is sad, and sometimes I try and help them, but I see how they get drained, and it's like the rat race everyone's running, and no one knows why, and no one knows where it'll end and when it started. But when I also tried to do the rat race for a bit, and I was highly dissatisfied. I did not have taste for it. But at the same time, I knew that through the mercy of Guru and Gauranga, I have certain things I can work upon. And I do not want to lose this potential and not use it in service. And I think through the devotees around me, especially I think Krishna Abhishek Prabhu, he really gave me the courage to switch. And this is why I wanted both my sides to come together, like my Krishna conscious side and the lawyer side. And I also saw how in our movement, of course there are devotee scholars, but then they are so much more older than me. Like in my generation, the young generation, I don't know how many of them are seriously considering religious studies, or there may be many, and I would love to connect with them. But that's the question that popped up in my mind, because I think if you are Krishna conscious, at least for me, like since childhood, I have some sort of responsibility to, my Guru Maharaj always used to say, the youth is the future. So we have some sense of responsibility to carry the movement forward and take it to places. And that was also one of the reasons, because for me personally, I want to always lead a life in service, and I think this is one service that I can offer to Srila Prabhupada. I don't know how far I'll go with it, but that's my intention. And that is why I switched from law to religion and law, because, and also, just the last point, I saw not a lot of Vaishnavis are into it too. And I have personally known so many Vaishnavis with such beautiful qualities, and they have so much knowledge. But when I got in the academic field, there are very few Vaishnavis that I could connect with. Like in 2019, I got the opportunity to work with the Shastric Advisory Council as the secretary, but there were like 2 secretaries, so I did not honestly do much work. But just to be in the circle, and whatever little work I did was very inspiring. And I also got to see Mother Narayani Devi and Mother Urmila Devi, and to even see, because I understand that we see examples in the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, but also to see proper disciples, especially Vaishnavis, that you can look up to. Then you can set goals that, yes, I want to be so sincere in Krishna consciousness, and also be a good follower, but also a good leader. And they say that a good leader is a good follower. So, yes, that would be my answer.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. Which of Srila Prabhupada books are you using in your master's thesis?
I am using a lot from the Brahma Samhita, Ishopanishad, Bhagavad Gita, parts of Chaitanya Charitamrita, because I used the Achintya Bheda Bhe Tattva, that argument, in my paper. I'm using the Mahabharata, but that is not by Srila Prabhupada, but one of the devotee scholars. What else? I'm using the Bhagavatam, a lot of references from the Bhagavatam. And also I am, because I see deity worship and we follow the Narad Pancharatra Vidhi, so I am also trying to take excerpts, but that is one aspect I'm still working on. But I think, yeah, my thesis has a lot from Srila Prabhupada.
Mm-hmm. And which other devotee books from devotee scholars you are using?
I am taking a lot from Krishna Kshetra Swami and Radhika Raman Prabhu's Attending Krishna's Image. It is a book on the Chaitanya Vaishnava tradition, but also on deity worship and the image worship, or seeing Krishna as a person and as a deity. I am using Pranava Prabhu, with his legal name it's Ferdinando Sardella, and he writes on personalism, which is precisely what I am looking at. Because, I'm sorry, I never mentioned my topic. My thesis is on divine properties, that's the title, how deities become real estate holders. So how divinity becomes real estate holders. So in my thesis, I look at the notion of juristic personality, which is in any person can be considered, any individual can be considered a legal person, or any entity, to be precise, can be considered a legal person and has similar rights as any other legal person. For example, a citizen has rights and even the deity has rights. So it is that amazing. And I also bring in theology and Vaishnavism to a great extent, because given my background. And I look at Daivata Sampati or Devattara Sampati. It's a tradition in South India and Bengal where one can dedicate property to the deity. And the deity is seen as a perpetual minor. So in legal terms, you can be a minor and you can have a legal representative. So a deity is a perpetual minor, and the deity has the right to hold property, to exercise several other rights. And the Shebait, or the priest or the servitor, is a legal representative in most cases. So this was very interesting, although it's a tradition only in South India and Bengal, but we see that a lot of legal cases that I went through, I could see it's all over India. For example, the famous Ayodhya case, this is a very important aspect of that, the deity being a person. In 2019, in fact, the Madras High Court forbid a deity from encroaching property. So they are treating deities as persons. And this is where I bring in theology, and I look at personalism and impersonalism, and then I go on to elaborate more on the personal or the personhood of a deity. And I gave a lot of other references. For example, I look at the Dharma Shastra, and I'm also referring to a lot of other academic scholars like Richard Davis, Oliver Patrick, Herman Kulke, Daniela Berti, and at the same time also looking at the Rig Veda, Manusmriti, a commentary by Medhatiti and Yagyavalkya, and also there is the Agni Vesha Griha Sutra. So I have excerpts from that. It's not like I read it, but I'm using a lot of these references to show how they talk about Devasva, which is property belonging to God. And so through Prabhupada books, I establish how the personhood of God, and through a lot of other references, I establish property belonging to God. And then I look at the legal aspect through several case laws. In fact, the first legal suit was in 1922 in India with the Privy Council when the British rule was on. The deity was recognized as a person. And there are so many other cases, like I said, the Ayodhya case, the Kashi Vishwanath case, and then even, for example, it's not only restricted to Hinduism, but even the Guru Granth Sahib in the Gurudwaras, the book is considered a person. So it's very interesting, and it keeps getting interesting. In fact, it's not a phenomenon that is just restricted to India. For example, in 1980s, there was a legal suit filed in London by the deity of Shiva. And India was just a technical plaintiff, but Shiva was the main plaintiff against the art museum in London. And Shiva won the case. Yeah. And there are so many other interesting examples. Even if we don't talk about deities, you may be knowing there is this American non-human rights project which wants to recognize animals as legal persons. So, gradually we see the aspect of personhood is expanding. Because today when I talk to my friends, deity is a person, and they just are so, let's say, flabbergasted. They're like, what? How? It's such an Indian thing. And then I explain to them, actually, no, it's not sectarian. And it's this personhood of deity is just, and it's so in so many other fields. Like even in New Zealand, in 2015, I believe, a river was recognized as a person. In November 2018, the Brussels Parliament recognized animals as sentient beings. So we see like animals, mountains, and New Zealand, a mountain also was recognized as a person. And as recently as 2019, a Madras High Court, as I said, recognized the deity as a legal person. So, and there is a very controversial judgment in India called the Shabrimala case, and they keep harping on the personhood of deity because the deity is a celibate, and they were saying that women cannot enter because the deity is a celibate. So we see how the personhood aspect is just permeating through all spheres, whether it's just for human, animals, or even deities. And then I ask the question, why is it so difficult to accept deities as persons? Because we have so many other examples. There are such beautiful, I would say, references. One of my favorite references I use is from Canto 10, chapter 23, text 22, where Krishna's bodily features are described. And they are just so beautiful. And I also enjoy writing it because as a lawyer, the legal part of me is satisfied, and as a devotee, the Krishna conscious part of me is satisfied. At least I'm trying to be Krishna conscious, so that part is satisfied, and I quite enjoy working on it. Yeah. Okay, so I took a long time with this. Sorry.
Wonderful. Do you think there is a need for such academic work?
Certainly, most certainly. Because I see how, at least in my South Asia Institute, I see people from different background, cultures, and different even academic background, like somebody from political science, some from law too, they come and try to comprehend what's going on in the Vedas, or like, let's say, South Asian culture. And so many times it's just sometimes I think it becomes like a Chinese whisper game, because it just gets transferred from teacher to student, and then so much that at the end what they study doesn't make sense. But with Srila Prabhupada's books, there is such sense of clarity that we can gain. And I think that is also why I just stand out, because when my teacher makes a statement or the professor makes a statement, and I just go to the root of it and I give a very logical explanation, and most of them are just so bewildered that they cannot even think through. I think, like with Prabhupada's books and the lectures that we have in the temple, there is just this beautiful sense of clarity that we gain. And I mean, I often listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures every morning, and he says what it is to be miserly. If you don't share, or you don't know how to use your wealth properly, you are a miser. And this is the wealth we have got. And if we wealth. Yes. So if you have wealth and you don't know how to use it properly, or you do not share what you have, you are a miser. And he draws a distinction between the miserly people and the people who are liberal. So, and then I think that this gift that we have is so special. And yes, I wouldn't say getting in academics and being in that university is easy. There are so many times when I don't want to be there. But just the drive that I have to share what I've got because it's so special. And if devotees don't go out and give the clarity, then the world, of course, it is going to get darker with Kali Yuga, but it's going to get worse too. But I do believe in Prabhupada's words and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's words and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's words that this movement is going to spread far and wide. And it is the responsibility of the generation like me and the others to come. And especially with the departure of my Guru Maharaj recently, I realized that I have to just fix myself so properly and be so fixed and convinced about my knowledge in Krishna consciousness and actually give it out. And there is indeed a need. I mean, I wouldn't say that academics, because intellectually it can get quite draining, and all of us have different moods and different ways of being with different attitudes. So I wouldn't say it's meant for everybody, but definitely our movement has a good number of people who can academically engage. And I mean, if you have the potential, then we must, because we have a sense of clarity, and I think we have a responsibility to lead. Because Srila Prabhupada said that devotees will be there in every sphere. So, yeah, I mean, I think, yes, there is quite some need for devotees to be there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do you have a support system to guide you through your academic work?
Yes, I do. I think a lot of my strength I definitely derive from the words of my spiritual master and my spiritual grandmaster, Srila Prabhupada. But apart from that, I have a good association of devotees. I could use more. I don't think I have enough. But yes, Krishna Abhishek Prabhu, as I mentioned, he very closely guides me, and I am very grateful for that. And on and off, I hear from other devotee scholars. But I wish I was more closely linked with some people from my own age, because I think this is something that we all know and have experienced. To be in the company of like-minded people is very important. So I do have a support system, but I would still say I could use more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay. The scope of your topic could get quite large. Do you have a focus area?
Yes, it's funny because even my supervisors, one is a historian and one works on temple culture. Heiko Frese, he's a historian, and he works in the areas of Orissa, Bengal, Gujarat, and he has learnt Sanskrit and Hindi, and quite a remarkable scholar. And the other is Ute Husken. She was also the chair of both are the chair of my department in history, and the other in Indology. And Ute Husken also works on South Indian temple culture. She works on the Varadaraja temple in South India, and she's been doing that for a while now. So both of them, after I explained my project to them, they were very impressed, and they said it has great potential, but it is so vast. They said, this is something for your postdoc or PhD. This is only a master's thesis. They said, relax. So with that, I had to narrow it down to one temple or one aspect. So at that point in time, I chose the Jagannath Puri temple because of growing in Krishna consciousness, I always had the opportunity, because Rath Yatra was such an integral part of my life, because Calcutta has, after Puri, the best Rath Yatra in India is from Calcutta. And I still remember I used to participate as a kid, and then when I grew up, I started organizing the processions. So Rath Yatra is very close to my heart, and even Bhaktivinoda Thakur is so closely related to Puri. And then, and I also have Jagannath deities at home. So I thought this is my chance, because my historian supervisor, he works a lot on Jagannath Puri, because he could never go in. He always would ask me how the experience is like. And then there's one of his supervisors, Herman Kulke, works a lot. And there's not much done academically. I would not say it's not much done, but in this aspect that I'm doing on Jagannath Puri. So then I decided that Jagannath Puri is something I want to take as my case study, because the Puri temple, according to the Orissa government, owns 56,000 acres of land, out of which, from what I remember, 25,711 acres of land are registered to the name of Jagannath. So Jagannath actually owns property. So he has legal rights and he has property rights. And this is again reaffirming my point on personhood of the deity. So this January I went and I did a field study in the Jagannath Puri temple. I went around, and I was much more scientific in my approach. And I saw the working of the temple, and also I'm also using actually briefly Sakshi Gopal as an example. I went to the Sakshi Gopal temple too, because God is a witness. And the work I used by Richard Davis on temples and images and worship, he uses this example of how deities were seen as judges. So you could have a petition filed to the deity. There's one example he uses. And Sakshi Gopal is precisely doing something very close like that. So I went to the Sakshi Gopal temple too. And my aim was to get a lot of documents through the Right to Information Act, so I could have legal documents, but then Corona happened. But still my thesis is steady. And so I'm just focusing on Puri. Yeah, that's my focus area.
Have you worked on any other interesting papers?
Yes. So when I was learning so much, I am generally a very inquisitive person, and my brain just thinks a lot. So I could make a lot of connections and draw a lot of lines here and there. And I worked on some very interesting papers, at least according to my professors. So I looked at religious icons, of course, and also the role of priesthood. That was anyway part of my thesis. But apart from that, I looked at the aspect of achara in the Dharma Shastra and habitus, which is propounded by Pierre Bourdieu. He's French, and I don't pronounce his name very properly. So he has this concept of habitus, which I try and align with how can I compare it to achara. So that's one very interesting paper I worked on. Then I look at Yukta Vairagya and Protestant ethics. That paper it's not like I gave much time to it, but it was a very interesting idea. So that's one aspect I look at. Then recently, one of my most interesting works, at least the ones which I liked working on, is Deontological Ethics and the Action Theory by Bhagavad Gita. So,
Can you repeat that?
Deontological Ethics, Deontology by Immanuel Kant, if I am not wrong, because I wrote it a while back. He advocates this theory on deontological ethics, and then I look at the action theory in the Bhagavad Gita, in the sense bad action, action in Krishna consciousness, and like that. So I think that was by far my most interesting paper, apart from my thesis. Yeah. And what else? Yeah, I mean, I also look at transculturality in law, where I suggest how even in reading legal texts or seeing legal cases, which have, let's say, touch of theology or touch of religions, we should look at religious texts. So that, again, I use this notion, I could say, given birth by Heidelberg School, the notion of transculturality. So I look at transculturality in law. That's one paper I wrote. And also, I look at Bhagavad Gita and nationalism. Yeah, but that's not, haven't completed it, but I'm still working on it. And these are all, I use them for courses, so I haven't really published them yet. And hopefully someday I will. But yeah, I mean, I'm this one I'm working on, the Bhagavad Gita and nationalism, because I found it very interesting, because Srila Prabhupada in his lecture says the Bhagavad Gita is misused by different people, and then he gives this very remarkable statement, highly contentious. He says, Mahatma Gandhi uses Bhagavad Gita for non-violence. But look at Bhagavad Gita, it's in the battlefield. So, yeah, so it's very interesting, because I say that you don't have to make Bhagavad Gita non-violence text, but you see how violence is being used. And even a lot of these nationalistic leaders in the freedom movement in India use the Bhagavad Gita as a very strong driving force. So these are some papers that I have been working on. Yeah.
Do you give presentations also?
In my field of study, I have to. Like, we had one conference, and so there I did, like, in the beginning, before I started my university, I had a presentation in a conference in Jadavpur University, Vaishnavism in Theory and Practice. But after that, I've been so busy with school, because even school, for every course you have to give a presentation, and you have to present your paper before you write it, because there is a distinction between seminar and lectures. So in a master's program, you have to take certain number of seminars, and in those seminars you have to write reading responses, give a presentation, and also write a paper. So, but yeah, apart from my schooling and my university studies, no, I haven't really given presentations. Yeah.
And how does academic students, professors, what was your experience so far? How do they relate to Vedic knowledge?
I would say that the academic world is quite divided, in the sense that there are some people who are pro-Vedas, like for and against. So even in my, at the university, I see at Heidelberg that there are a few academicians who go deeper. They learn the language. I mean, it's not even their cup of tea sometimes, but then they learn Sanskrit, they learn Pali. And then even we have a lot of courses on Rig Veda, and and they have reading sessions. And I see that there is a growing interest in Vedas, and well, I say growing because I see the number of people signing up for some of these courses have been increasing. So yeah, but then at the same time, there are also, there are some scholars like Wendy Doniger, etc. Wendy Doniger, she's quite famous for, let's say, blaspheming Bhagavad Gita for being violent. I mean, we have so many scholars who do that. but she's one of the famous ones. But like for here in Zurich, there is a scholar called Angelica Malinar. She works on the Mahabharata, Chaitanya Vaishnavism. So I would say whether they are for or against, they have such great interest in the Vedas. And when I take history courses, we go back on how the Vedas precede every other text that is there around the world. So whether it's historically or in an ideological perspective or political science perspective, I see there's always some Vedic aspect that is discussed. Of course, I am at an institute that studies culture, South Asian and transcultural, so it's about different cultures like Asian cultures. But yes, of course, I cannot deny that there is a growing interest in the Vedas. Yeah.
Have you been in contact with Krishna Kshetra Maharaj?
Yes, I have been, not recently, but then I met him last May. Yes, I think in 2018 May, I was in Simhachalam, and I met him. But even before I came to Heidelberg and I started my studies, I wrote to him and I expressed, because he was at the conference where I presented my project. And I think I got the courage to actually go ahead because these scholars like Krishna Kshetra Maharaj, Radhika Raman Prabhu, Krishna Abhishek Prabhu, they were like, yes, you have potential. And then they thought my questions were intelligent, because sometimes I think I ask too many questions. And for me, it's not like I try very hard. It's just something that, it's just like, because I think a lot, so it just comes to my mind and I ask it. So sometimes I feel very conscious. But then these individuals, they encourage me to do that. And they said that, yes, well, in academics, you have to ask the right questions. Whether or not you get the right answer is something different. But you definitely need to know what to ask. Yeah, so yes, I've been in touch with him. Not so much recently, but he was one of the individuals who, I would say, kick-started the energy in me.
Wonderful. What excites you the most? What are you looking forward to accomplishing through your academic work and connecting the law and religion?
Well, when I started this project, my main aim was to teach in law schools, because this is something, I felt a gap in law schools where they just study legal texts, and whether it's cases on temple culture or culture, they do not even want to study things like sociology, philosophy. And I feel that there is this big gap that is there. But then I also imagine how draining it can be for teaching at law schools. So my general plan is that if I get a good PhD and if things go steady, I want to get into teaching at universities. And I mean, of course, that depends on how qualified I am and if I get opportunities. So, but that's the aim that I am striving towards. I'm working on to teach at universities, because I think, we know that the job of a teacher is difficult, but it's the most impactful. And when you are a person who has, let's say, had the best of both worlds, like I had a strictly academic and, let's say, materialistic background in terms of my academics with law, and even my law school friends, like they were hardcore lawyers because it was one of the best law schools, and they are very successful lawyers now. And I think a few years down the line, they will be like, let's say, senior lawyers, senior counsels. So I had, by Krishna's blessings, that opportunity to be with that crowd, but also relish the fact that Krishna consciousness gives me a special added, benefit, or it just puts me a step ahead of everything else. So my aim is that I think it's very important that we go out, and deep in my heart, if I live long enough or if I do well enough, I also want to improve the Mayapur International School and the schooling in Mayapur. Because once I mentioned this to Mother Urmila Devi, and she said, well, good luck with that. Nice dreams. But I know how everything is so strategic and it's so difficult. But I hope that someday, because I think it's so important for children who have the drive to study, and to give them the right set of understanding, the right set of teachers, and encourage them. And if we have like strong devotee, like let's say Pakka devotee children from Mayapur doing well in universities, because I was very inspired by Radhika Raman Prabhu, Gopal Hari Prabhu, and they were homeschooled, and then they went to Oxford, and now like they are in such good positions. So I mean, why not? Why should devotees not do that? I mean, honestly, sometimes personally I'm baffled. Then I think that it's this one lifetime I've got. Should I really spend so much in this materialistic world? Because you have to definitely interact with non-devotees. Yeah. And then you have to be good to them. And then my Guru Maharaj told me that preaching sometimes is being exemplary. And you read Srila Prabhupada books, and even if you don't go on Harinam, but if you are so exemplary, the people want to know how you are so exemplary. That is preaching. Because if you stand out and you are a good person, then they want to know, okay, where do you get this goodness from? And that's the best kind of preaching. Well, not...
You're also happy.
Yeah. So, yeah, and at times it can be difficult, and it can be, like Maya is so strong. So, I mean, yeah, that way I think association of devotees is something that is saving me, and also the association of my Guru Maharaj. It's saving me. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm so steady and so fixed up in Krishna consciousness, and there are times when Maya is very attractive, but at the same time I keep coming back to Krishna consciousness. So I think, yeah, even if I haven't developed, let's say, the higher taste, I know there is a higher taste which is lying here. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing I want to maybe definitely work on, to let fixed up children or like the youth to actually do things. Because, I mean, yes, of course, being Krishna conscious and the temple life is important, being in the Dham is important, preaching is important, but why must we neglect this kind of preaching? Temple Bhagavatam class, temple seminars are important, but why don't we do it also at another level? So, yeah.
So thank you very much. This was great, very inspiring, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors, in your Krishna consciousness, and Hare Krishna.